monitoring your questions too. How will you take the questions, Ginger?
Um, just I'll ask for questions periodically, and then we can kind of go through them then.
Okay, cool. I'm not avoiding you guys, just so you know. My bigger screen is here. That's my laptop here. So cool. I'll put off my camera and take it over, my friend.
All right, so I believe I am sharing, so I'll go from here. So we're going to be doing a Fabric 101 session. This is going to be kind of a preview of some of the things that we're going to be talking about. Of course, there's no way that I can do everything in an hour, so this is going to be a fast run through. All right, a little bit about me. I am a Microsoft certified trainer as well as a data platform MVP. And not only am I on LinkedIn, I have classes on LinkedIn, and you'll want to stay all the way to the end because I'm going to give away a free one at the end on Fabric. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Fabric architecture. Fabric architecture is a lot of different things. Data warehouse, lakehouse, pipelines, database, K-QL, semantic model, also event house. All of that is on top of OneLake, and that is where all of your data is going to be stored. So OneLake is a type of ADLS Gen 2 account. It is not the same as ADLS Gen 2 account, but it is a type of one. So you can think of it like that. It can store anything. So you got audio, you've got images, whatever you got, go ahead and throw it inside of OneLake. And when you use data and you're storing data, it stores it in Delta format, which is a compressed Parquet format, which allows you to add more data onto your OneLake drive because you only get one of those for your entire Fabric tenant. And you can implement role-based access security, commonly known as RBAC, on the different folders inside of OneLake, making it even more secure. And there is other security we're going to be talking about after that. And if you're using a lakehouse, that is what the structure you're going to need for files. Now, everything inside of Fabric is basically based on Power BI because Power BI started first and then it evolved into Fabric. And so everything, it uses the same workspace architecture that Power BI has. So if you're familiar with Power BI, you're familiar with a lot of things architecturally that are the same with Fabric. So your workspace is where you're going to be connecting and using data that you have been granted access to. And there's security in workspaces. Well, it's kind of odd. You either edit everything or nothing. Those are your options for security levels. And it can contain very many different item types. So if you want to access all the data that you have inside of OneLake, all of that's going to be inside of workspaces. Now, one thing that is really cool is that you also adds the ability to shortcut. So Microsoft realizes that people have data other places. And, for years, you really had one option for that. You had the ability to copy the data. So you could copy it in, but they've also added this new technology called Shortcut. So let's say, for example, I have data in ADLS Gen 2. Well, if I create a shortcut to it, what I'm doing is inside of OneLake, I am creating a link to where that data lives. That means when that data is updated, I get that updated data, but I don't have to create any copy or pipeline processes to make that happen. I just get it. And you can shortcut your data also if it's in another workspace. So I was working for a really large hospital slash university a little bit last year. And they had a large system that actually Microsoft profiled as being one of their strategic partners. And that's a company called Epic. Epic handles the um, basically the computer logistics for many different hospitals. It's one of the largest in the US. And it has a database because naturally it runs on SQL Server. And if you have an Epic database and you want to bring it into Fabric, that's a big job. You don't need 10 people to do that, though. One will work. So if one person brings in that Epic database and they bring it into OneLake, you can just get a shortcut to it. So you can just access everything that somebody else has done. You can also do something called a mirror. We'll get into mirrors as well, but a mirror is a live change data capture copy of data. And you can do that not only with things that you would expect, like Azure SQL DB, but also Snowflake. And Microsoft is got on-prem SQL Server mirroring as well, and also you can use data that is in somebody else's workspace. All they do is sharing it with you. Now, I know I'm guessing that pretty much everybody here is very familiar and has used a SQL Server database sometime in the maybe not so recent past, like maybe today, a few hours ago. And databases were generally the way that people thought, you know what, I got data, it goes in the database. But with a lot of advancements in cloud technology, data storage, and compression technology, you may not need to do that anymore. Now, I will say that there is going to be nothing faster than a database when it comes to accessing and writing data. You'll not top it, but you can get pretty darn fast with a lakehouse configuration. And the beauty about a lakehouse is all of the data is in files. You don't have to like load it into an MDF or anything. You just create a file and your files act as a database. Lakehouses are used throughout Fabric as their primary data structure because they're using those instead of lakehouses. Excuse me, instead of using lakehouses instead of SQL Server databases. But so it can contain files of different file types, but everything is going to that's going to be using in it is going to be added to a Delta Parquet file, and then that's what you're going to be querying it. So all the tables are in that Delta format. So your lakehouse files, the section, which is also a section inside of your lakehouse, you can put anything inside of a lakehouse. I can't query anything, but you can add anything. You can use shortcuts. You can use mirrors. And you can use all of these things inside of a query. But if you add a file, you can't query the file directly. You have to load it to a table. So when you add a data to a table inside of a lakehouse, the data in tables is going to be in a Delta Parquet format. Well, formatted data can be automatically converted from that files section that you have in a lakehouse. If you have any CSV files which have issues in your file section, as in they're not perfect, you can of course still add them to your table section, but you're going to have to do a little bit of, modification to them, maybe playing around with them inside of a copy command to make that happen. And you can include any different types, but you just may not be able to add those into a lakehouse. Now, one thing that Microsoft is really good at is making sure that people can use the technology and skills they already have. So everything in your lakehouse is going to use T-SQL, and you can connect to it with the database management tool that if you've used SQL Server, you know and love, and that of course is in SQL Server Management Studio. And you can do this through what's called a SQL endpoint. And SQL endpoint separates querying from files. So it's totally different. Now you need a SQL endpoint to query. And in addition to Management Studio, you can use Azure Data Studio until they get rid of it, or Power BI. You'll also be able to use it inside of Visio Studio Code with the Azure and add-ons if you're using those as well. So it uses T-SQL, so you don't have to learn a new language. But unfortunately, one major caveat: the T-SQL that it uses is case sensitive. Now, Microsoft has promised they're going to fix that, but that day is not today. And it saves off every query you write if you use the Fabric UI. But if you use Management Studio, works just like Management Studio. Now, in addition to the architecture of Fabric with OneLake, you've got SQL endpoints for your lakehouse, and you also have another data structure that you can use called a warehouse. So let's kind of talk about both of those here for a little bit. So in a database, in a lakehouse, the files act as a database, and data stored in OneLake is Parquet. And you can choose to add data shortcuts and don't have to transform them for that. You transform your data into Spark notebooks, and it uses T-SQL. You can also use a warehouse. Now, a warehouse is not the same. If you've ever used Synapse warehouses, it's nothing like that. Those use dedicated SQL pools, totally not the same. It's a re-engineered service based on the SQL engine, and it reads and writes Delta Lake format tables as well, and uses the same kind of compute engine that you use inside of Fabric. That is one thing that Microsoft did add to Fabric, kind of using feedback that they got regarding, some of the other things that were going on. And let's face it, nobody likes a giant Azure bill that they can't figure out. So instead of not being able to figure out the entire Azure bill, Microsoft moved everything to not understanding what's in the Fabric Azure bill. So you pay for a allotment of, you can do an allotment at a yearly reservation, you can do an allotment at a monthly, or you can just pay by the hour. Which you choose to do has everything to do with how many hours that your operation tends to run. Or you can, of course, always use your Fabric trial for a while. 60 days to start. Maybe they'll extend it. Maybe they won't. They play games with that one. So, but your warehouse uses that universal compute just like a lakehouse does. So it's not separate. It's thrown into the same thing. Now, how would you load data into a lakehouse? Well, you can always upload it just straight up if you drop in a file and say upload. You can use something called a Dataflow Gen 2. You can use a Data Factory pipeline. Yes, Microsoft moved Azure Data Factory elements into Fabric as well. Or you can use a Spark notebook, whichever you feel like doing. All of these will work. So let's go ahead and take a look at some Lakehouse table here. And I did this Buck Woody style, which means it says pre-recorded. So if I can look at Fabric here, I can see that I've got two options at the bottom, Fabric and Power BI, and I'm doing everything from workspaces. So I'm going to go to my Fabric Workday workspace here, and we can take a look at my workspace settings, and we can see that I've added an icon there. I've added a domain, which basically I gave it a category. So I put it in the subdomain of Fabric under training. And I have my license information, and I have it configured as Fabric, so which is why it's got that diamond next to it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new item. And I'm going to create my new item is, of course, a lake house. So all I have to do with like every component, I just give it a name. So I'm going to call this LK underscore demo. And I'm going to add a schema to it because you need to select that if you want to do that. And this is going to create a lake house. That's it. That's all I had to do. Now I have a lake house. Doesn't have any data in it, but I have a lake house. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to take a look at it. I'm going to add a schema. I need to do that first. So if I want to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and make my schema. I'm going to call it, let's see, dim. I'll call it that. Now notice I've got that analytics endpoint created as well. So I'm going to go ahead and have dim there, and I'm going to add another schema, and I'm just going to call my other schema for fact. Now, generally speaking, when I add schemas, I do it for the source of data, but we'll just start with that. So I'm going to then go ahead and upload some files. And I can do it multiple ways, of course. But I'm just going to do it this way by clicking on the button there, and I'm going to select some files, and I'm going to select some files from my PC here, and I'm going to go ahead and say open, overwrite them if it exists. I don't need to because I don't have anything there. And this is adding files. You'll notice these are all CSV files, and I'm going to go ahead and add that to my files section of my Lakehouse. Now, remember what I said earlier? I cannot query things that are added to my Lakehouse files section. I need to load them into tables. But hey, they start out here as files. Now, this isn't, of course, the only way, but I wanted to show you the easy way first. Walk before we could run, basically. So here, if we take a look at my CSV file, Let's see if this is good looking CSV, because you'll know I can only upload good looking CSVs here. And we see this is messed up. I've got this weird city dimension with a bunch of commas. Then I have my column names, and then I have the data. So this is not well formatted. Well, what the heck does that mean? Well, I'll go ahead and show you. If I click on this 3 ellipse and say load to tables, and they say new table, and I can call it whatever I want. I'm going to use my schema. I'm going to call it city. And I want to, I've had the option to use header for column names. I'm going to go ahead and say load. Now, since my first row has got that messed up city dimension, comma, 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 it's not pretty. So it's not going to load automatically. So what I'm going to have to do instead here is not use headers. So I'm going to say that I want to create a new table. And I'm going to, instead of doing it like this, I'm going to uncheck that. So I'm going to uncheck use header for column names. So now it's going to load. So I have just loaded my dim city file to my table section of my lake house. This means if I refresh my dim section there, I will of course see that. Well, let's take a look at some other ones. Now this one looks just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and load this to my new table. And I'm going to call it, of course, my schema of dim, and I'm going to call it customer. And since this looked fine, I can just go ahead and do a straight load, and I'm not going to get an error here. It worked out fine. So I've got my data loaded here. So I'm loading into my tables. So if I do a refresh, open up here, I can see city and I can see customer. So those load just well. I'm going to do that with my date table and pull that from here. And I'm going to dice roll on using the header for column names and load up my new data. Now, of course, this is not the only way. I want to stress that there's better ways of doing it, but I wanted to show you the easiest way to get data into your lake house first. You know, easy stuff first. We'll get into the hard stuff if you join me on the 7th of November. So we got the data loaded here. So I've got data loaded. If I refresh it, I can see it all. I'm going to go ahead and complete my loads here. And this one is not going to work, so I didn't bother doing that. And the reason why this doesn't work is my columns have spaces in it. And as everybody knows, you should never put spaces in your column names. So I'm not going to be able to load those very well. So I'm going to, again, have to load this and then fix it because it's not well formed. So I'm going to take a look at my sales table here. I'm going to load that up to my fact table. And then say load, see if I can load up that one. I need the cheap stuff, not the hard stuff. Yeah, I get that. What's great is you can do this yourself with any file. You're like, hey, it's loading, great. Now, what this just did is what I just did is I created a bunch of Parquet files. And you're like, really? Yes, I did. Because any table is a Parquet file. Let's see what we got. So if we take a look at it, we'll notice that we don't have pretty columns there because we didn't happen to have those load properly. But if we look at something that did have things that loaded properly, I do, of course, have column names. And notice here my queries are saved at the bottom. So I've got query 1, I've got query 2. Now I'm going to go to my SQL endpoint because I query in my SQL endpoint, not within my lakehouse itself. So I've loaded up a bunch of CSV files and transform them into Delta Parquet. Now I also have the ability to explore what I loaded, and I'm going to use that using the OneLake Data Explorer, something that you can easily download and then take a look at what the files look like inside of OneLake. So here is my data, and I'm going to go to my workspace and then look at my Fabric Workday. And then open that up. Zoom in here so we can see it first. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And here is my lake house. It created a folder. I've got files. These will be my CSV files that I loaded up there. And if we look at my tables here in my, this is of course in preview. If we look at my tables, now if we take a look at my DIM, what do I have folders. Open that up, we'll see Delta log and a Snappy Parquet folder. This tells me that I actually move things to Delta Parquet because this is what Delta Parquet files look like. A folder with a log and a Parquet folder. So congratulations, if you do these steps, you've automatically created Delta. The name is a name that it generates, and it's telling you the name of the table based on the name of the folder that it creates. The Parquet files are compressed files that you cannot read. So that's why it gave it that weird name, part blah blah Snappy Parquet. Does that answer your question, Sophia? Kind of like getting these on the fly. So this is transforming my data into Delta Parquet. Any questions other than Sophia's about this demo at all?
Yeah, I think most of it is about the YouTube channel that we have.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Sophia, just
Good
hang in
deal.
there, okay? We should be sharing that soon. Thanks.
All right. So what's Parquet anyway? Well, it's an open source format. So Microsoft is actually going all in on open source. So Microsoft is using file formats that have been created, and this Parquet actually was started with Hadoop, which is why it has a dumb name, because that's a rule. Anything Hadoop must have a dumb name. And Parquet is a compressed file, which is why you can't read it and why it gives you a strange name. And ends in .parquet. Now, this compressed file is columnar, and it reduces storage by 75%. And it's a default format for lakehouses and warehouses. And it is required for the next step, which is that Delta layer on top of it. Delta layer contains that log file that you saw. Now, with Parquet Delta, you do not modify. You basically do logical deletes and add new files to your data. So if I was to delete a record, I would have two files because I would need to create a new record to make that happen. So what is, again, Delta? So Delta is basically a layer on top of Parquet, and it adds relational database properties to Spark. So if you have Delta, then you get relational tables that support querying and data modification. You get support for classic ACID transactions. You get data versioning and time travel. Time travel just means it's got a log, and you can use the log. It has support for both batch and streaming, and it's got, standard formats and operability. So how does that work anyway? So you read data, you filter it, and then you write it. So let's take a look at that. So let's say that in this instance, because I had a lot of data, I happen to have two Parquet files, and that is version 0. And let's say that I want to delete where segment equals 3 from those files. It's going to logically delete the first two files and give me a new file that is missing segment 3's. Won't have that. So that means if I do select star from sales, it'll know that, you know what, I'm only going to read from part 3 because that is what it is right now. So if I say that I want version 0 though, it is going to give me the files 1 and 2 because it knows by looking at that log file what's in there. So that's kind of what you see inside of Delta and how the logs work. Now there's a built-in way to maintain that using vOptimize and vOrder. Tell you a lot more about that in November. Now, if you want to query data, you can do that from the set, like I said, from the Endpoint Management Studio, VS Code, or hey, you can query data in Power BI, really. So how do you connect to it with different data tools? Well, you'll notice that when I created my lakehouse, I have a semantic model and I have a SQL Analytics endpoint. So I can take my SQL Analytics endpoint here, click on the gear, click on SQL endpoint, and I get this giant connection string. I'm not going to remember that. I'm going to go ahead and copy it, open up trusty SQL Server, and I'm going to paste that in there. And when I paste that in there, I'm going to change my security to Entra MFA and then say connect. So I'm using the login information for Fabric to connect to it. Now this is my zoom in here so you can see it. This is that long GUID that I didn't remember. Here is my LK demo. Here are my tables. And I can go ahead and use SQL Server Management Studio to do anything I want. Any security that I have will automatically apply. So I can do queries here. Now let's say that I wanted to look at a different workspace, because again, your endpoints look like they are for databases. But actually, let's take a look at all of my lake houses, which I filtered down here. And you can see in this particular workspace called Fabric, because I'm uncreative like that, there are a lot of different lake houses. So I'm going to go ahead and click on a lake house and then click on and look at my connection string here and copy that. I can also go into Management Studio and connect with that different long GUID. So I'm going to go ahead and say connect database engine. I'm going to paste that new one in here. And I'm also going to connect with MFA because that's what you have to do. Enter with MFA. Can tell you what version of SQL Server Management Studio has if yours is Active Directory. So that means you're off an old one. So if we take a look at this one, we can see all of the different lake houses that I have, not just one. I only had one in that first workspace, which is why you only see one. Here I've got multiple, so you see multiple. So I know it looks kind of misleading, but that's exactly how many you do see, is you see all of them, which I just kind of wanted to make sure that you realize that, because it's not obvious and does kind of look broke, but it isn't. That is how it works. So that's how all of your data gets into automatically. You could use Management Studio, which I like the user interface better. All right, so data sources for Lakehouse. Another one you could do is a mirror. So a mirror is that live copy that you have of a database using a kind of change data capture. So currently, Azure SQL database, Azure Synapse Analytics, Data Lake Storage Gen 2, Managed Instance, Amazon S3, Azure Snowflake, and Cosmos DB. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, yeah, but I have a on-prem SQL server. What about that? That is in preview. I imagine that by no time November rolls around, I'll be able to demo that. I'll talk to more about that at that time. But so the benefits of mirroring, you get near real-time data access in Fabric, and your data is mirrored in OneLake. So you have a copy of that data just as it is inside of your database. It doesn't impact the original source in terms of speed, and it only supports tables, though. It won't bring over any views you happen to have. So you can create a Lakehouse shortcut and add that without copying, and you can add those to your Lakehouse as a new table. There's different shortcut sources that you can add. And again, you have files and tables. Put the shortcuts there and make sure your names don't have spaces. So you can, if you move that data though, you will break the shortcut. Now, of course, Microsoft has also included components such as ADF, and those are known as pipelines inside of Fabric. So pipelines are basically the backbone of all orchestration. All of your orchestration is done through processes. That's how you're going to do scheduling. You know, I want this job to run when this thing finishes. And also, very importantly, handling failure. I'm not going to talk about medallion architecture today at all, but that is something I will be talking about in November because it is a really important component when you are designing pipelines. Can't talk about everything, so I'm skipping that for now. So one of the things that you could definitely take a look at and use is the copy data activity. Now, the copy data activity is something that Microsoft created. It has a lot of functionality with it. You can use it to, copy the different elements very, very quickly. And it's great when you don't need to transform it very much. And we'll take a look at how to do that. So I am going to go ahead and create a new pipeline here. And I'm going to give it a name like, I don't know, PL City. And I'm going to go ahead and copy data. So I'm adding that to my canvas. And I'm going to say that I want to copy, give it a better name. I'm going to say that I want to copy data from city data. Just copy that over. So my source is going to be LK demo. It's a file because again, I might have bad files. And I'm just going to go ahead and browse to it. We will talk about parameters, but again, we're doing the easy stuff today. We'll do the more challenging stuff inside of class, including things like using variable libraries for this. But right now, I'm just going to copy a delimited file here. I'm going to tell it what I want it to do. I'm going to say that I don't want to have the first row as header, so I'm going to uncheck that. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Does Fabric interact well with Databricks? Yes, it does. Microsoft is working with Databricks to make sure that there is good compatibility between the two products. They even brought their Databricks president on the stage at FabCon. They're really working hard to make sure that they work well together. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this over, and this is queuing it up. And as easy as that, I can see my input here. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my outputs here when I get it. It's in progress. I don't happen to have it yet. There to the end. And I went ahead and I can see more elements if I include them here. I've got everything added to just copying my data over. So really easy to get data inside of Fabric to do different kinds of transformations. Because generally speaking, what you want to do is you want to create an environment probably for reporting or other kinds of analytics you might do. Because let's face it, people want to do Excel, and we'll show you how to connect all of your data to Excel because you want to support what people want to do. So now I can take a look at how I've got that loaded here. All right, let me go ahead and tell you about some other things that you can do inside of Fabric. And one of those is Dataflow Gen 2. And Dataflow Gen 2 is a lot like Power Query. Power Query is a wonderful part of Power BI that allows you to transform data super easily. It contains different applied steps and is a really easy way to transform your code. Unfortunately, it can't handle very large data sets. So basically, you can take your data sources, you can use Dataflow Gen 2, you drop it into a latest lakehouse or a data set. So what kind of things can you do with Dataflow Gen 2? Oh, you can filter and sort rows, you can pivot and unpivot, and you can merge and append queries, do different kinds of conditional splits, replace values, do duplicates, all sorts of different elements inside of it. Anything you can think to do like you can inside of Power BI. So let's take a look at what I can do with Dataflow Gen 2. So I'm going to go ahead and select Dataflow Gen 2 here. I'm going to go ahead and say get data. And I'm going to select my source for my data. And my source is going to be my files here. So I'm going to go ahead and fix up, or my table rather. I'm going to fix this up because notice my table is kind of not pretty. So it doesn't have the headers on it, and I want headers because headers are, of course, a cool thing, and I don't happen to have any. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I am going to sort this. And when I sort it, my numeric column, I'm going to get text that's going to show up at the top. And so now I see I've got that city dimension that I don't want, and I've got the top line there where I can do my famous transform of make first row into headers. So that'll automatically fix up my data for me. So I'm going to go ahead and say use first row as headers. And then I'm going to get rid of that row that's got those weird commas in it by just saying that I don't want nulls, and that gets rid of the entire row. Poof. And I have just fixed up my data. Simple as. And now I can do my appropriate typing of things to make sure that I've got the right data type, which I couldn't do because I had text in some of them. And I could also do things like get rid of columns that I don't want. So I can do these things inside of Power Query. And notice here on the side, I've got applied steps that show you when I'm removing columns like I am here, I've got removing columns that are being added. So you can like walk through those different steps and see the different elements inside of it. Don't need this, so I'm going to make that go away. Yeah, looks like garbage to me. Going to go ahead and remove that column. I'll keep that. And I can do something like, change this data type. So I'm going to, looks like all numbers to me. So I'm going to go ahead and change the type from text and make it whole number. So I can see that it's generating M code. I don't have to know M code. I know that it does generate it though. I'm going to add my data destination, going to add it to my lakehouse. I'm going to go ahead and put it to the same place. And I'm going to call it, put it in my workday and in my LK demo. And then I'm just going to call it, I don't know. Let's just call it City 3. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. So it's going to go ahead and show up. So I've shown you a couple of different ways to fix up City. It's going to show you what I did here. I'm going to go ahead and say save. And then when I publish it, I've just fixed everything up. Now, that couldn't be easier. So it's running, my data flow here is running. I didn't give it a name. That was bad of me. I should have done that, but I didn't. You can always go back and fix the name for that. So that looks good. So if I look at my lake house here, I see I have it called City 3. It's got all of those changes that I made to it. Real simple and easy way of transforming my data. All right. So there's other methods for transforming data. I showed you the pipeline activities. You also have T-SQL notebooks and Python notebooks. So get all of these different elements here. With pipelines, I can, do a lot of transformations, but I can always use my T-SQL notebooks and add data sources like SQL endpoints, passing pipeline parameters not supported, and I can include different languages and notebooks, and then only T-SQL will run. I can also use Python notebooks, just straight up Python, not just Spark. Not just Spark, but of course, I can use it to add other elements as well. So it's not used for data transformation, but more for different kinds of automation tasks. Now, I know I've just blown through a whole bunch of things really, really quickly because I wanted to kind of give you an overview of all things in Fabric, and there's just so much to talk about. It's just hard to figure out where to start, but I wanted to give you some elements of places that you can go look as well. If you want to start learning now, take a look at the stuff out there for certification exams. Not because certification exams are the best thing ever and you want to do that forever and ever, but because there's a lot of great content and it happens to say certification exam on there. Now, there is one other thing that I promised to give you, and I will do that. I found QR Monkey that allows me to do these really fun logos. So I created one, and the last one is for a LinkedIn learning class. So this LinkedIn Learning class, if you do that QR code, will allow you to create take my starter fabric class, and it won't cost you anything. So, and if your company has LinkedIn Learning and you don't have to pay for it, I highly recommend using it and then doing that for other elements. So I left a little bit of time here for questions, wanting to know if anybody has any that they might want to ask here. Oh, I'm going to put that slide back up though, because I want to make sure I want to put that I'm going to put that
Okay.
icon there in chat so that you have it. 1 second. There you go. There's a QR code. Does it handle unstructured data, image, text, long notes files? It does handle unstructured data, but unstructured data is something that you are going to have to write processes to include, unless it's something that's easy to format like JSON. It will handle images, but then again, what are you going to do with it? That's up to you to write something for it. Long notes files, it handles Varchar, Varchar Mac. So if that's what you're talking about, it handles those. What if you need to display it on a dashboard? Well, if you need to display things on dashboards, I assume that you mean a semantic model. You're going to automatically get a semantic model when you create a lakehouse, and you can format that for Power BI, and I will definitely dive into how to do that. Can one lake connect to support other data warehousing hosted on other cloud vendors such as AWS? Of course, because you can shortcut to Amazon, Amazon S3 and Amazon Redshift, so that you can have a shortcut. So whatever's on Amazon Redshift or Google BigQuery can be added into OneLake. For the pre-con, do we set up the resource groups in Azure portal prior to the session to hands-on? I'm still working out the logistics. Probably not, though. You don't need to set up I hope to not have to set up a resource group. Depends on the number of students that we have, so I'll have more information about that. For the SQL Saturday Houston Fabric session, what should we bring to the Fabric session? Oh, well, definitely your laptop. And I will be providing a GitHub repo for class, and you'll have information that we'll send out to the attendees for that GitHub repo. Of course, when I do a class, I do hands-on exercises so that you have the ability to practice all of this, and we'll work out the logistics of how you're going to be connecting to Fabric at that time.
So I have an announcement. So Ginger, that pre-con is live now. And only till this Sunday, you have a discount of $50, which means that the sale price would be $200 per person. The limit is 50 people for the class. So if you want to go ahead and register now, that's a good time. And by the way, Brent's class is also 250. So, but this is just for limited 3 days. If you want to sign up, great. So we don't have to worry about publishing it or creating too many future posts on LinkedIn and so on. So please, folks, go ahead and use this link. And I will also be sending it out to all the attendees for today. Remember, these and FabCon and all that, how much does this go for?
At FabCon, it went for, I think it was 800.
Yeah.
So,
but I liked it actually. I could identify a lot of what you did with when I created a KQL database, basically. So I had to have a Fabric login and all that. So I still have 23 days to go. Yeah. Cool. Okay, folks. Anybody wants to have any questions or anything, I can unmute you. You guys can feel free to talk.
Thank you very much, Jay. Appreciate the feedback.
Okay. So Ginger, I just published it here too, and I will be sending you that information if you want to share it in your thing. Now, what Brent is going to be doing is he's going to be publishing a video of this promotion, and then you can also do it, and then I will share it on LinkedIn. and Anuja and Huyen and Olga and Chin, they will republish every single video that we publish or any single post that we publish. So that way, we're doing pretty good, folks who are here. I think my colleague Khayyam is also here. For those who are also interested in the full day of free learning, which is on November 8th, which is the SQL Saturday, uh, we are literally half full already, and I'm not kidding. So please go ahead and register. It's worth it. Only you might have to pay about $15 for the food, which is awesome. But
Yeah,
other
and I
than
hope
that,
you're
yeah,
all there because I love meeting people that are online in person. And if
yeah,
you happen to have any random fabric questions, I'm up for any random fabric answers. So
this is a good time,
please
guys.
do
We
show.
still have
Yeah.
like 6 minutes to go, so feel free to ask away. I will stop the recording for now. But
Okay. Yeah, one of the
hi,
things that
Kayam, you want to say something?
one thing I wanted to talk about too is I will be talking about licensing. I know licensing is a complex issue.